thing you want to start off with, before you get your glue gun going, you want to assemble your frame and lay out all of the different moss and plants until you land in a masterpiece that you really like, that you're excited about. Then we come in with the glue and we lock everything in. So I'll show you step by step sort of the different types of ways that I like to get started and how I like to think about the different types of mosses. So first, I like to actually get started with the sheet moss. And again, this is the one that's flat, looks kind of like a rug, like a carpet. I like to come in and really try to find a nice place to sort of set it. And the really nice thing about sheet moss is that it takes up a large amount of space, so it really helps serve as your base, as your foundation that you can then layer and build on top of. So I think that's a really good space for it. I'll show you what that looks like. You can play around, move it around until you find a nice space for it. And again, there's no right or wrong answers here. Really, this is your opportunity to be the artist, to be the Van Gogh, and really have fun with it. Second step here is I like to actually come in with the mood moss next. The mood moss, again, is the pillowy-like moss. It's really thick and it's really nice for foundation, or for dimension, sorry. And I really like to use mood moss as a sort of like a centerpiece. I like to think of mood moss as a really nice centerpiece that gives the frame that beautiful dimension. So I found a place that I really like for it here. I'll show you what that looks like. Here we go. This is kind of what that looks like. You have your sheet moss at the bottom, then you have your mood moss sitting right over it. And then next, I like to come in with the reindeer moss. And the reindeer moss, I really think of it kind of like a filler. And I'll come in and fill in the gaps here, all the spaces, with the reindeer moss. Don't be afraid to layer over and over. You know, reindeer moss works really nice when layered, so you can definitely, you see I just added one piece here and I'm adding one right over it. Don't, you know, layer away. It's reindeer moss works brilliantly for dimension, for filler, and just keep working until you land on a really nice design here that you're excited about. You'll see I'm coming in here around all of the spaces here and adding some reindeer moss, layering. I'm liking how that looks there. It's looking good. Connect here the two sides, the reindeer moss. Don't be afraid to paint outside of the lines, if you will. And what I mean by that is allow the moss to come out and seep into the borders. It actually gives it a really nice natural look when you do allow for it to seep out of the border. So we'll keep working our way there. Generally with the reindeer moss, I tend to like keeping them together in bunches versus standalone stragglers here and there throughout the frame. I feel like it just gives it a really nice look when you have little colonies of reindeer. So you'll want to keep working until you fill in all of your gaps and you've landed on your final design here with your moss. Again, at this point, we're not using glue gun. we are just laying the moss out until we find the design that we really like. Here we go. All right, I'll show you how this looks. This is where I am with the moss. Like, we haven't added any of the other pieces yet, and the other pieces I'm talking about, the flares, the embellishments, sort of like the final touches. We'll come in and add those shortly, but this is sort of what that looks like. You can see you have little peekaboos here of the sheet moss, lots and lots of sheet moss, reindeer moss surrounding the mood moss. So lots of dimension. Here you can take a closer look there, what this looks like. All right. The next, I like to come in with my flares. These are the tree ferns. I generally like these guys to hang out of the frame, and this is why I call it a flare, because it gives it a really, really beautiful touch when it's hanging out of the borders here, just like this. I generally like to have one hanging on each side. You can sort of figure out what you like best, but this is kind of how I like these guys to hang out. I normally like to stick them into sort of crevices where two different types of moss meet. So in this case here, it's where the reindeer moss and the mood moss meets, and similarly on this side, it's the intersection of all three mosses. The next, I like to come in with the dried leaves, and generally I like to have the dried leaves sort of hang out in the same areas where I have my tree ferns. I feel like it just gives it a little of a splash there where we have the tree ferns. So I generally like to keep those two together. You can play around, find a different spot for them. Generally, the tree ferns and the dried leaves, they look really, really nice when they're hanging outside of the border. So any kind of configuration where they're spreading out of the border, I think they just look very beautiful. So I'll continue here. Next, I like to come in with my hops. One thing to call out about the hops, I mentioned this earlier, but the hops they're very fragile, so you want to be very careful with these. I also like to keep the hops together in clusters. I think they just look so nice when they are a little colony versus little stragglers here and there. So generally, my rule is either three, 4. Little hops together. You can see I have them here listed, here placed together. So generally I like to keep my hops together. You can see I have 3 here together in a colony. Then lastly, I have here lichen. I like to use the lichen to bring in that depth into your design. So play around, look at different places within your frame until you find a place that you think it really gives it that nice depth and final sort of touch. I think I found a place here that I really like for it, and there's another place right over here. Generally, I like to put the lichen also at intersections. You can keep it all together, bunched up into one to have sort of one big splash, or you can sort of split it up and put it into different parts, but generally it works really nice in intersections of different mosses coming together. Great.